Life Audio.
The Bible Study Podcast, episode 888. Today we continue the study of 1 Maccabees and the intertestamental period, continuing on with the second half of chapter 2. Welcome to the Bible Study Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We are continuing on with the story of Mattathias and his sons, but first a word from this sponsor. And so we're picking up here in the middle of chapter 2 because we got partway through last week, and we're starting here with the counterattack. And so you may remember that last week we left the Maccabees, and I'm just going to call them that for simplicity's sake. That is the name of the book, even though they don't really have that name yet in the book. But Mattathias and his friends and his sons are in hiding. They have gone out into the wilderness and have decided that they are going to fight back, counterattack. Then there united with them a company of Hasidians, mighty warriors of Israel, all who offered themselves willingly for the law, and all who became fugitives to escape their troubles joined them and reinforced them. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and renegades in their wrath. The survivors fled to the nations for safety. And Mattathias and his friends went around and tore down the altars. They forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys whom they found within the borders of Israel. They hunted down the arrogant, and the work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the nations and kings, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand. And so they are fighting back. They are basically saying, no, we are Jewish. We're going to follow the Jewish laws. We're not going to be worshiping the gods of the other people around us. And you notice the people who have, they called the renegades here, those who have basically said, we're going to be less Jewish. We're going to be more Greek. They have fled to the nations, and that basically means anywhere outside of this region, to those people who are in the region that is becoming Hellenized, is what we call it. They're becoming more Greek. And so they're having some success here as they fight back against this Hellenization of Israel. Continuing on, the last words of Mattathias. Now the days drew near for Mattathias to die, and he said to his sons, arrogance and scorn have now become strong. It is a time of ruin and furious anger. Now my children, show zeal for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of our ancestors. Remember the deeds of the ancestors, which they did in their generations, and you will receive great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful and tested, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and became Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our ancestor, because he was deeply zealous, received the covenant of everlasting priesthood. Joshua, because he fulfilled the command, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified in the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. David, because he was merciful, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. Elijah, because of great zeal for the law, was taken up into heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael believed and were saved from the flame. Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of the lions. And so he calls back to all of those people who were pillars of the faith, those who kept the faith, and says that because they kept the faith, good things happened. Because Caleb testified in the assembly, Caleb is the one who, of the two spies who go into the promised land, Caleb and Joshua come back and say, yes, sure, the people are big, but it's a wonderful land, and if God wants us to have it, we can do it. So because he testified in the assembly, he received an inheritance in the land. Versus those other 10 spies who came back and said, those people are too big, we can't do it, who didn't go into the promised land. And so those who were faithful were rewarded, is really what he's saying. There are others who have been in tough times before, but have been faithful. Now you too, as I'm going away, need to be faithful. One other thing that's interesting here is the three people who were saved from the flames, that's also known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but these are their Israel names. And when you're talking about people who did not adopt the religion of the land they were in, these are three people who are a good example of that. And Daniel also, who is delivered from the mouth of lions because he is faithful to God and not to the king. And so continuing on, so we observe from generation to generation that none of those who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of sinners, for their splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today they will be exalted, but tomorrow they will not be found, for they will have returned to the dust, and their plans will have perished. My children, be courageous and grow strong in the law, for by it you will gain honor. Here is your brother Simeon, who I know is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. He shall be your father. Judas Maccabeus has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battle against the peoples. You shall rally around you all who observe the law and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the nations in full and obey the commands of the law. Then he blessed them and was gathered to his ancestors. He died in 147th year and was buried in the tomb of his ancestors at Modain, and all Israel mourned for him with great lamentation. Now, this is an interesting story here in Maccabees because there isn't one ruler, there isn't one hero here in this story, and therefore when Mattathias dies of old age, he isn't the end of the story. So we will see as we go through this book a succeeding passing of the torch, not from generation to generation for the rest of the book, but from brother to brother. And so we get the torch passed here from one generation to another, from the father to two of his sons in particular. Simeon is going to be the leader, and Judas Maccabeus is going to be the leader of the army. And so he puts this in place before he dies and then says, be faithful to God, because God will be faithful to you, basically is his message. I'm going to go into chapter 3. These chapters are of such length that it's going to be a little awkward. We're not going to be keeping with chapter boundaries for episodes. We're going to do the early victories of Judas. Then his son Judas, who is called Maccabeus, took command in his place. All his brothers and all who had joined his father helped him. They gladly fought for Israel. He extended the glory of his people. Like a giant, he put on his breastplate. He bound on his armor of war and waged battles, protecting the camp by his sword. He was like a lion in his deeds, like a lion's cub roaring for prey. He searched out and pursued those who broke the law. He burned those who troubled his people. Lawbreakers shrank back for fear of him. All the evildoers were confounded, and deliverance prospered by his hand. He embittered many kings, but he made Jacob glad by his deeds, and his memory is blessed forever. He went through the cities of Judah. He destroyed the ungodly out of the land. Thus he turned away the wrath from Israel. He was renowned to the ends of the earth. He gathered in those who were perishing. Then Apollonius gathered his nations and a large force from Samaria to fight against Israel. When Judas learned of it, he went out to meet him, and he defeated and killed him. Many were wounded and fell, and the rest fled. Then they seized their spoils, and Judas took the sword of Apollonius and used it in battle the rest of his life. When Saron, the commander of the Syrian army, heard that Judas had gathered a large company, including a body of faithful soldiers who stayed with him and went out to battle, he said, I will make a name for myself and win honor in the kingdom. I will make war on Judas and his companions who scorned the king's command. Once again, a strong army of godless men joined him and went up with him to help him to take vengeance on the Israelites. When he approached the ascent of Beth Horon, Judas went out to meet him with a small company. But when they saw the army coming to meet them, they said to Judas, How can we, few as we are, fight against so great and so strong a multitude? and we are faint, for we have eaten nothing today. Judas replied, It is easy for many to be hemmed in by a few, for in the sight of heaven there is no difference between saving by many or by few. It is not on the size of the army that victory in battle depends, but strength comes from heaven. They come against us in great insolence and lawlessness to destroy us and our wives and our children and to despoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws. He himself will crush them before us. As for you, do not be afraid of them. When he finished speaking, he rushed suddenly against Seron and his army, and they were crushed before him. They pursued them down the descent of Beth Horon to the plain. 800 of them fell, and the rest fled into the land of the Philistines. Then Judas and his brothers began to be feared, and terror fell on the nations around them. His fame reached the king, and nations talked of the battles of Judas. And so we see here with the passing of the generations that Judas Maccabees, and one of the reasons we have the name we do for this book, has become the great leader. This great leader who, we're told in this poetic section here, has embittered many kings, that he was like a lion's cub roaring for prey, that basically he was strong and courageous and will be remembered. And so, like their father before him, the brothers are being faithful to God, faithful to the law, and to be Jewish as they were taught to be in the law. And so they are being faithful, and at first, everything is going well. But this is a longer book, and we shall see. And with that, we're going to end this episode of the Bible Study Podcast. If you have any questions, send an email to host@thebiblestudypodcast.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at thebiblestudypodcast.com. And thanks so much for listening. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
Hi, I'm Zach.
And I'm Randy.
And we're from Salty Saints Podcast. We're a theology and apologetics podcast.
We hope to better equip you to be salt and light for your community. We hope that we can help you to go out and be a reflection of Jesus Christ to those around you, to your friends and your family, and especially to those that do not know Christ.
To find out more, subscribe at lifeaudio.com.